Commotion in the Ocean by Giles Andreae and David Wojtowicz. There's a curious commotion at the bottom of the ocean. I think we ought to go take a look. You'll find every sort of creature that lives beneath the sea swimming through the pages of this book. There are dolphins, whales and penguins. There are jellyfish and sharks. There's the turtle and the big white polar bear. But can you see behind the wrecks and in between the rocks? Let's see if we can find who's hiding there. Crab. Crab likes walking sideways, and I think the reason why is to make himself look sneaky and pretend that he's a spy. Turtles. We crawl up on the beach from the water to bury our eggs on dry land. We lay a whole batch, and then when they hatch, they scamper about in the sand. Pitter-patter, 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 pitter-patter. Dolphins. The wonderful thing about dolphins is hearing them try to speak, but it's not how do you do like I'd say to you. It's more of a click, whistle, squeak. Squeak, squeak, click, click, whistle, whistle. Angelfish. Hello, I'm the angelfish, darling, the prettiest thing in the sea. What a shame there are no other creatures as gorgeous and lovely as me. Jellyfish. The jellyfish just loves to jiggle, which other fish think is quite dumb. She knows that it's not all that useful, but jiggling's very good fun. Jiggle. Jiggle. Jiggle, jiggle. Shark. I swim with a grin up to greet you. See how my jaws open wide. Why don't you come a bit closer? Please take a good look inside. Swordfish. I love to chase after small fishes. It stops me from getting too bored. And then, when I start feeling hungry, I skewer a few on my sword. Octopus. Having 8 arms can be useful. You may think it looks a bit funny, but it helps me to hold all my children and tickle each one on the tummy. Tickle, 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 tickle. Stingray. At the bottom of the ocean, the stingray flaps his wings. But don't you get too close to him. His tail really stings. Bzz, bzz. Lobster. Never shake hands with a lobster. It isn't a wise thing to do. With a clippity-clap and a snippity-snap, he would snip all your fingers in two. Deep sea. Miles below the surface, where the water's dark and deep, live the most amazing creatures that you could ever meet. There are fish of all descriptions, of every shape and size. Some have giant pointy teeth and great big bulbous eyes. Some of them can walk around and balance on their fins. But the strangest fish of all have glowing whiskers on their chins. Blue whale. There's no other beast on the planet as big as the giant blue whale. He measures a massive 100 feet long, from his head to the tip of his tail. Whoosh, whoosh. Barnacles. We're just a bunch of barnacles. All we do is cling. We know it's not that glamorous, but it's our favourite thing. Walruses. Our bodies are covered with blubber, and our tusks are incredibly long. We're grumpy and proud, and we bellow out loud to show that we're mighty and strong. Penguins. We waddle about on our iceberg, which makes our feet slither and slide. And when we get close to the water, we leap with a splosh off the side. Polar bears. Deep out in the Arctic, the mummy polar bear snuggles up with her children as it's very cold out there. What a lot of funny creatures we have seen beneath the sea. What a lot of funny things they do. Some of them might lick their lips and eat you in one bite, and some might want to swim around with you. The dolphin's very friendly, and the lobster's very fierce, but the shark is the most dangerous by far. Can you name some of the other friends we've made along the way? See if you can tell me who they are. Guess How Much I Love You by Sam McBratney, illustrated by Anita Jerram. Little Nut Brown Hare, who was going to bed, held on tight to Big Nut Brown Hare's very long ears. He wanted to be sure that Big Nut Brown Hare was listening. Guess how much I love you, he said. Oh, I don't think I could guess that. Oh, I don't think I could guess that, said Big Nut Brown Hare. This much, said Little Nut Brown Hare, stretching out his arms as wide as they could go. Big Nut Brown Hare had even longer arms. But I love you this much, he said. That is a lot, thought Little Nut Brown Hare. I love you as high as I can reach, said Little Nut Brown Hare. I love you as high as I can reach, said Big Nut Brown Hare. That is quite high, thought Little Nut Brown Hare. I wish I had arms like that. Then Little Nut Brown Hare had a good idea. He tumbled upside down and reached up the tree trunk with his feet. I love you all the way up to my toes, he said. And I love you all the way up to your toes, said Big Nut Brown Hare, swinging him up over his head. I love you as high as I can hop, laughed Little Nut Brown Hare, bouncing up and down. But I love you as high as I can hop, smiled Big Nut Brown Hare, and he hopped so high that his ears touched the branches above. That is good hopping, thought Little Nut Brown Hare. I wish I could hop like that. I love you all the way down the lane, as far as the river, cried Little Nut Brown Hare. I love you across the river and over the hills, said Big Nut Brown Hare. That's very far, thought Little Nut Brown Hare. He was almost too sleepy to think any more. Then he looked beyond the thorn bushes, out into the big, dark night. Nothing could be further than the sky. I love you right up to the moon, he said, and closed his eyes. Oh, that's far, said Big Nut Brown Hare. That is very, very far. Then he lay down close by and whispered with a smile, I love you right up to the moon and back. Goodnight Harry by Kim Lewis. Harry the elephant was getting ready for bed with his friends Lulu and Ted. Good night, everyone, said Harry. I forgot my bedtime story, thought Harry. He opened his books. He looked at the pictures. He looked at the words. His eyes grew heavy. He snuggled down again. I'm waiting, he said. But sleep didn't come to Harry. Perhaps I'm not really tired, thought Harry. He hung up his clothes. He tidied his room. He ran on the spot. He touched his toes. He hopped on one foot. He jumped up and down. Then Harry got back into bed. Zzz, went Lulu. Snore, went Ted. I'm waiting, said Harry. Snore, went Ted. I'm still awake, sighed Harry. Then Harry began to worry. He worried and worried. He just couldn't stop. He thought of tomorrow. He thought of today. He thought about nothing. He thought about lots. He wriggled and scriggled. He rolled in a ball. And he took all the blankets. Hey, said Lulu, waking up with a start. Harry, what are you doing? Said Ted. I can't get to sleep, Harry said sadly. Harry looked out of the window. He rubbed his tired eyes. What if sleep never comes at all? He said. Never mind, Harry, said Lulu. We're here, Harry, said Ted. The three little friends sat close together. They looked at the world outside. Lulu sang a song to the moon. Ted counted the bright evening stars. They heard an owl hoot. Petals fell in the breeze. They felt the dew of the night. Harry snuggled up with Lulu and Ted. His eyes felt heavy. He gave a big yawn. Good night, Harry, said Lulu. Sweet dreams, Harry, said Ted. But Harry was fast asleep, and snuffle was all he said. The Princess and the Pea, Chapter 1. In a land far, far away, there was a glorious kingdom. In the kingdom stood a great castle, and inside the castle lived a handsome prince. The prince was sad. The prince smiled back, then went to his chamber. The Princess and the Pea, Chapter 2. That evening a huge storm came. Thunder clapped, lightning flashed, and the rain clattered down on the castle roof like the sound of 1,000 horses charging into battle. Suddenly there came a loud knock at the castle door. The king put on his robe and opened the door to find a cold, soggy young lady standing in front of him. I am a true princess, she said. Please can I have some dry clothes and a bed for the night? The king let her in. She says she's a true princess, said the king to the old queen mother. The queen mother didn't say a word. Instead, she thought to herself, we'll soon see about that. She then handed the princess a nightgown and said, put this on while I prepare your chamber. The Princess and the Pea, Chapter 3. The Queen Mother began preparing the chamber, but in a peculiar way. First, she took the covers, sheets, and mattress off the bed. Then, she placed a single garden pea on the bedstead. And then she laid 20 mattresses on top of the pea, taking care to separate each layer with a soft eider-down quilt. After this, She replaced the bedclothes on top of the mattress and said to the princess, "Your chamber is ready." The bed was now so high off the ground that the princess needed to climb a ladder to get into the bed. The princess climbed up the ladder, got under the covers, and blew out her candle. The Princess and the Pea, Chapter 4. At breakfast the next morning, the Queen Mother turned to the princess and said, "My dear princess, how did you sleep?" "Oh, not at all well," said the princess. "I mean to say, I am extremely grateful for your kindness in putting me up for the night, but there seemed to be something ever so hard and uncomfortable under my mattress. I didn't sleep a wink." My, replied the Queen Mother. "Is that so?" The Queen Mother turned to the prince and said, "I believe we have found your true princess, for none but a true princess possesses such a delicate sense to feel a single pea through 20 mattresses and 20 of my finest quilts. You must be wed immediately." The prince was overjoyed. He turned to the princess and said, "Dear princess, would you do me the great honour of becoming my wife?" She blushed, then taking a minute to finish a mouthful of cereal, she said, "On one condition." "Anything," replied the prince. She looked back at the prince with a cheeky grin and said, "That you promise, dear prince, that from this day forward, any pea that should enter this castle is simply for eating and not for sleeping upon." The prince looked back at her, chuckled, and said, "I promise." The end. The Elves and the Shoemaker, Chapter 1. Once there lived a kind but exceedingly poor shoemaker. He was an honest and hard-working man, but he had fallen on hard times. So hard, in fact, that he could no longer make ends meet. All that remained in his workshop was enough leather to make a single pair of shoes. In the light of the setting sun, he carefully cut out his last piece of fine leather and neatly laid it on his workbench, ready to finish his work the following day. And returned home to be with his wife. "Take my hand, dear," he said. "Let us make a wish for our fortunes to change and for our years of hard work to finally bring us the ample reward that we deserve." His wife stretched out her arms, laid her hands softly into his, and they made their wish. The shoemaker rose early the following morning. As usual, he ate his breakfast, brushed his teeth, gave his wife a kiss on the cheek, and made his way to the workshop. He was expecting to find his workbench just as he had left it, with his carefully prepared leather ready to be made into a pair of his finest shoes. Shining pair of the finest shoes your eyes could behold. They were perfect, immaculately finished to a standard that he himself would have been proud to put his name to. He stood there for a moment, utterly dumbfounded. "I don't believe it," he thought to himself. Suddenly there came a loud rap at the workshop door. A well-dressed man entered and said, "Good morning, kind sir. I was passing, and that pair of fine shoes on your workbench caught my eye. Could I please try them on?" "Why, yes, of course," said the shoemaker. The man knelt down and tried on the shoes. "Just as I suspected," said the man. "A perfect fit. I'll take them." What happened next shocked the shoemaker, perhaps even more than the appearance of the shoes. The man asked the shoemaker for the price of the shoes. The shoemaker told him, and this was the man's reply. "Nonsense," cried the man. The shoemaker looked disappointed. "I mean to say," the man continued, that the quality and workmanship is plain to see, and I will not pay you a penny less than double what you ask." The shoemaker thanked the man dearly for his generosity. The man smiled, doffed his hat, and strode out the door wearing his new and very shiny shoes. The Elves and the Shoemaker, Chapter 3. With the money that he had received from selling the shoemaker went out and purchased more leather. This time he had enough leather to make 2 pairs of shoes. In the light of the setting sun, he carefully cut out 2 pieces of fine leather and neatly laid them on his workbench, ready to finish his work the following day. The next day arrived. To his astonishment, the same thing happened again. But this time there was not 1 pair of shoes on his workbench, there were 2. And as before, the quality of the workmanship was so exquisite that 2 well-dressed men came into his workshop and paid twice the asking price. This continued day after day. With the takings from the day, the shoemaker would buy enough leather to prepare twice the number of shoes for the following day, and every morning the shoes would be immaculately prepared, polished, and stacked on his workbench, ready to be sold. 4 pairs, 8 pairs, 16 pairs, 32 pairs. This pattern carried on for weeks until the shoemaker was selling thousands of pairs of shoes every single day, each as expertly crafted as the last. In fact, they had become quite rich from selling so many shoes. One night the shoemaker turned to his wife. "Dear wife," he said, "I feel so blessed for our wonderful fortune of late, and I long to know the secret behind this shoemaking magic, so we can show our deepest thanks." "Perhaps we should stay up tonight," replied his wife. "We can creep down to the workshop by candlelight." The shoemaker agreed. That very night, as the clock struck midnight, they each lit a candle. Silently they made their way down to the workshop and peered in through a slightly open window. What they saw was so magical it instantly took their breath away. The Elves and the Shoemaker, Chapter 4. An army of beautiful elves filled the workshop. Each elf was no more than 6 inches tall and sat upon a tiny wooden stool working furiously, 1 elf per shoe. They rapped and tapped and hammered and stitched at such a rapid pace you could barely see their little arms at all. 1 elf stood out. She was not hammering, nor stitching. Instead, she was standing at the front of the workshop, facing the other elves, like the conductor of a miniature orchestra. She wore a tall, pointed pink hat with the words Grand High Elf neatly embroidered on the front. Suddenly, the candle slipped from the shoemaker's grasp and landed with a thud on the stone floor. Hearing this, all the elves froze in terror. A moment passed. Then the Grand High Elf cried, "Everybody run!" And that was it. The scene that ensued was nothing short of pandemonium. The elves scattered in a frenzied attempt to flee the workshop as fast as they could. "Please wait," cried the shoemaker. "We are here to say thank you," said his wife. As the panic subsided, all eyes fell on the Grand High Elf. She stepped forward and said, "We are hungry, and the clothes upon our back are threadbare. Would you be so kind as to feed us and replace our clothes? We would be forever in your debt." The shoemaker lay down on the ground, his face now level with the Grand High Elf. He smiled at her and said gently, "Of course, Your Highness. We will gladly give you all the food and clothes you desire. And please forgive me, but I've noticed that your feet are bare. I'd like to make you each a pair of my finest shoes." She smiled back. That would be wonderful, she replied. From that day forward, the Elves, the Shoemaker, and his wife became the very best of friends. They worked hard and went on to live a happy, prosperous, and full life together. The end. The Paper Dolls by Julia Donaldson and Rebecca Cobb. There once was a girl who had tiger slippers, and a ceiling with stars on it, and a butterfly hair slide that she kept losing, and 2 goldfish, and a nice mother who helped her to make some paper dolls. They were Ticky and Tacky, Jackie the Backy, Jim with 2 noses, and Joe with the bow. And they danced and they jumped and they sang. And they jumped onto a bus and rode to a farmyard and danced with the pigs. Then they lay on a rooftop and stared at the stars till a tiger slunk out of his den, and he crouched and he snarled and said, "I'll leap up and catch you." But the paper doll sang, "You can't catch us. Oh no, no. We're holding hands and we won't let go. We're Ticky and Tacky and Jackie the Backy and Jim with 2 noses and Joe with the bow." And they floated down the stairs and they danced round the honey pot and kicked the crumbs and explored an island till a fierce crocodile grinned his grin and gnashed his teeth and said, "I'm coming to crunch you." But the paper dolls laughed and sang, "You can't crunch us. Oh no, no. We're holding hands and we won't let go. We're Ticky and Tacky and Jackie the Backy and Jim with 2 noses and Joe with the bow." And they hopped into the garden and they sniffed the flowers and chatted to a ladybird and lay down in a forest of grass. But along came a boy with a pair of scissors and he said, "I'll snip you." And Joe with the bow, and all the pieces joined together and the paper dolls flew into the little girl's memory, where they found white mice and fireworks and a starfish soap and a kind granny and the butterfly hair slide and more lovely things each day and each year. And the little girl grew into a mother who helped her own little girl make some paper dolls. They were Poppy and Pinky and Binky the Blinky, Fred with 1 eyebrow and Flo with the bow. And they jumped and they danced and they sang. Tā koutou e moi.